Hi.
Alright, hello guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are brand new here, my name is Nikki and this is my book nook. Y'all, today we are talking about Looking for Alaska by John Green. For those of you who do not know, The Fault in Our Stars is my favorite book to ever exist. My favorite work of literature. Literally, I never stopped talking about that book. I read it for the first time back in like 2012 when everybody else was reading it, when it was the book of Tumblr. And I know a lot of people love that book, but truly when I say it's my favorite, like there is no book that means more to me, that affected me in the way that that book affected me. I've never related more to a character than I relate to Augustus Waters. I quite literally have Oblivion tattooed on my body because that's just how much I love it. You're just gonna have to trust me because it's not gonna focus. But in summary, The Fault in Our Stars, love it. John Green in that book was just incredible. And after finishing it, I had this desire to like read every single word he had ever written. Like I would have been willing to read his grocery list at that point. But at the same time, I was also like terrified to read more from him because The Fault in Our Stars, though it is my favorite book, if you've read it, you obviously know, it's a rough journey. It's heart-wrenching. I've probably read it 5 or 6 times at this point, and every time I read it, I bawl my eyes out. He knows how to affect people. He knows how to get into the deepest parts of your brain and your heart and just rip them right open. So all of this is to say, I bought Looking for Alaska, this exact copy, back in probably 2013. Like the pages are super yellow because I bought it back then. And then I proceeded to just shuffle this from shelf to shelf, house to house, apartment to apartment, and just never read it until now. I don't even have a valid excuse. Hi, Draco. So cute. As to why it took me so long to read this, and I don't even have a reason particularly for reading it now. But I can confirm, after reading it, that The Fault in Our Stars was not just a one-off, and John Green truly just is like, I don't want to say my soulmate because that's not what I mean, but he's like my twin flame when it comes to our weird brains and just the way we think about things, the things that like just stress us out, the way that we like contemplate life and question it and its meaning and its purpose, and just there's so many things. I swear, people always ask that question, like if you could have a dinner party with anybody dead or alive. Like for me, I'm like John Green. I could literally sit there and talk to him for hours and hours and hours, and we probably would just talk off into oblivion about life and the universe and just everything. But yeah, anyways, love him. This book though, I want to talk about. I have a lot of things to say, and I feel like this is going to be a really rambly video. I just want to start off by saying I always try my best on my channel to not give away any spoilers for books. I want you guys to go and read them. I don't want to give away the whole farm. I just want to give you a little tidbit to get you excited, unless I just straight up didn't like a book, and then I will often rant and just tell you everything. But that's not the case here. I want to do a spoiler-free little moment where I kind of generally tell you what this book is about if you guys haven't read it yet. But I will say, this is a 17-year-old book, so a lot of people have read it. I know it was a lot of people's like on their required reading list for school, and they read it in school. That wasn't the case for me, but I totally can understand why it was for other people. But yeah, all of this is to say, gonna give a general synopsis, and then at some point I'll say, if you haven't read this yet and you're interested in reading it, step away and then come back and finish the remainder of my ramble for this video, because I just have a lot of thoughts, a lot of feelings, and I just want to discuss. So let's just get into it. So Looking for Alaska follows this boy named Miles Halter. He is a high school student, and he's really just kind of a nerd. That's the only way to put it. He really doesn't fit in with anybody at his school. He really kind of keeps to himself. Something really particular about Miles is he has this obsession with last words, like famous people's last words before they died. And I know that John Green, not to keep rambling on about him, I'm obsessed with him if you can't tell, he has an obsession as well with famous last words, which is really cool that he like inserted that into the main character of this book, because it's something that he's personally like passionate about and interested in. So but yeah, Miles literally has like the last words of like every famous person ever memorized, lots of important people in history. And a thing that he loves about last words is it tells you a lot about, the exact quote he uses is something like, people tend to die in the same way that they live. So their last words tell you a lot about who they were. So it's one of his many quirks. My point is Miles is a quirky guy, and one of his personal favorite last words is by this man, I cannot remember his name, Francois Rabelais, that is his name, he's a poet. His famous last words were that he's going to seek the great perhaps, which is basically just like, he doesn't know where he's going. He's off to his next adventure, the possibilities are endless, and Miles has this desire after learning these great last words to go and seek the great perhaps before he dies. He doesn't want to wait until he dies to go and seek the great perhaps. He wants to switch things up, get out of his comfort zone. So he basically chooses to go to this boarding school, leave his high school and go to a brand new boarding school that is in another state in Alabama. It's called Culver Creek, and it's the same boarding school his dad went to when he was a kid, but not anything that Miles knows, and is very much out of his comfort zone because he's gonna go there by himself and start a new life and new friends and be away from his parents. Just a very exciting new adventure. So Miles gets to this school, and right away he just kind of starts to meet a very interesting cast of characters. The thing about this school is everybody there kind of gets a nickname, so they instantly give him the nickname Pudge because he's like a really scrawny kid. So like the rest of this book he's called Pudge, so honestly saying Miles, I'm like, that doesn't even sound right because they call him Pudge. But he meets lots of people. He has a really interesting roommate that goes by the name of the Colonel that kind of shows him the ins and outs of the school, and there's very much like a hierarchy to the school because it's very much, there's a lot of like rich kids that go there that don't actually live there on the weekends, like they go home to their parents, but then there's the more like middle class poor kids that live there that are really there for like the academics and are trying to get into a good school, and they do live there because they're whatever, for whatever reason, their lives are crazy. They actually live there, they're immersed in it, and they're not a weekend warrior is how they call like the rich kids. But yes, Pudge gets introduced to lots of people, but the main person that immediately sticks out to him is this girl named Alaska Young. Alaska is an enigma. She is like nobody Pudge has ever met before. She's beautiful and just not like most girls, but not in like an annoying way. Like she's just very different. She's very thoughtful. You know, she like sneaks out and smokes cigarettes. Like she's very like mature for her age. Just very like kind of poetic in the way she says things, and he's just fascinated by her. She has like an older boyfriend that doesn't go to the school. Like there's just like a lot of things to Alaska that Pudge is just like, whoa, like who are you and where did you come from? And she quickly changes his life and opens up a whole new world for him, and lots of things ensue, lots of twists and turns, but that's really like the most basic sort of synopsis I can give. I know that's like not much to it, but everything else, if you're interested, you just gotta kind of like figure it out for yourself. But this does turn into like a little bit of a mystery. There's lots of like pieces to put together in this puzzle. A really interesting cast of characters. Again, there's a lot of people and it takes kind of a minute to get all their names straight and everything, but very much like a found family trope to this. Very much meaning of life, what is our purpose, what goes on inside of people's heads. And a big focus of this book is how like one small decision can just change the course of your life, and how true that really is. And yeah, it's just wild. I will say this book deals with some very intense topics, some very triggering topics. And one thing about it is we have to keep in mind it was written in 2005, and in 2005 we were a lot less sensitive in the way we talked about these things, a lot less careful in like the way we approached them. So when these things are talked about in this book, it's kind of like jarring and shocking the way it's like so simply stated, but in a way like almost refreshing. It's just kind of weird. Like I think it's really important to keep in mind when reading this book, if you haven't read it yet, that it is a very old book. And I think that the twist in this, the little turns, the big kind of plot twist, you might think that it's not super crazy or that it might be somewhat predictable, which I did to some extent, but you have to remember that this book, being so old, had to have been, I mean, I don't know every book ever written, but like had to kind of have been like one of the first of its kind, which I think is why so many people read it in school. Like, I think it was a very kind of profound book with like the issues and situation that it dealt with and the ideas around it. It was just very, very interesting, and at this point I'm gonna have to just talk about it. This really is a book that just made you think. It just got inside your, it's one of those where you still, like, finishing it, you don't really know what you think or what you believe or what really happened, which some people don't like that. A lot of people want like a really definitive answer or ending, but I kind of like when stuff is a little open-ended, and The Fault in Our Stars was that way too. A lot of books, like, I kind of personally like when it's left up to your imagination, because people interpret things different ways. But yeah, at this point, if you have not yet read this book and you're planning to read this book, I would exit and then come back, because I just wanna ramble for a little bit. So I don't wanna keep comparing this to The Fault in Our Stars, but I can't not, right? Because it's the only other John Green book that I've read. John Green has a very particular writing style, a very particular way that he writes characters, because I think he writes his characters very similar to kind of how he is. Like, all of these teenagers, just like Augustus, just like Hazel, are very like smart. They're very like flowery in the way they talk. Like, they know a lot of things that most teenagers wouldn't know. And I know some people get annoyed by like that kind of quirky, flowery writing. I personally love it. I think that these characters were similar enough to Augustus and Hazel that it feels like a John Green book, but I don't think they were carbon copies or anything like that. Miles, his character was interesting. I very much, again, I feel like it's kind of similar to Augustus with the fearing oblivion. I get the whole idea of like wanting to experience the great perhaps before you die, like wanting to just change it up. Like, I totally get in a rut too, where I'm like, life is too simple right now. Things are coming too easy. I'm too comfortable. We gotta change it up. Like, I totally get and relate to that. And I mean, I went and studied abroad in Australia whenever I was in college, because I'm like, I gotta see the world. I gotta do something while I can. Like, I always feel like while I'm young and single, like, let me explore, let me do all the things that I possibly can. So I get Miles's urge to go to this new school, meet some new people. I get it. I feel like I've heard that this book is a little controversial. I know a lot of people don't love it, and I can understand. How do I phrase this without making me sound like a horrible person? A lot of people don't like books that have aspects of like cheating or like infidelity in them, right? And so obviously throughout this book, Alaska like has a boyfriend, and at some point like Pudge has a girlfriend. He's dating like Laura, I think was her name. And they obviously like each other, and there's lots of flirtation going on, and then there's obviously like the almost hookup scene when both of them are currently dating other people. And I think a lot of people probably didn't like that. Like, that's probably like a reasoning for it, but, and I don't want that in my real life, obviously, but like, I don't mind it in books. Like, the tension between them, the kind of soulmate connection between them, honestly, I really, really loved. I loved the way that Alaska like pushed Pudge out of his comfort zone. I liked the way that he kind of like grounded her, the way that they could kind of just bounce off of each other, like their banter. I just really, really enjoyed their relationship. I thought it was really cute and different. Alaska was a little wild. I mean, I get it. She obviously went through a very traumatic thing with like her mom passing away and all that, but at times I did find her like self-deprecating just way of saying things where she's like, oh, I'm smoking cigarettes to die, or I'm a deeply unhappy person, and her just like chugging beers all the time. Like, I don't know, it was weird, because it's like she wasn't always deeply unhappy. Like, she kind of seemed at times like she was just really like quirky and cool and like one of the guys, and then the next minute she's like chugging warm wine at 9 a.m. to like get through the day. Like, I don't know, like I feel like she kind of was a little all over the place, and maybe that was the point of her, like that she was all over the place and you couldn't keep up with her. But generally I liked her. I think obviously we got to talk about like the whole climax deal with this book of her storming off right after her and Pudge finally had a moment, which freaking shattered my heart. I hate that. I hate that concept of like, we just didn't have enough time, or like right person, wrong time, or I guess I love it. I hate it and I love it. It's like, it sucks, but it also like pulls at my heartstrings. Like the way that she said to be continued, and then she goes off, obviously gets in this car accident, and there is no to be continued because she's dead. I will say, I didn't know what this book was about, but just generally like reading, skimming the back, hearing basic things about it, like to me, it was glaringly obvious that she was going to die. Like, especially the way that it was like 150 days before. Like this whole book, you're trying to figure out like, what is the before referring to? Like there's obviously a before and there's an after, like says it right on the back. To me, it seemed really obvious that she was gonna die, and I don't know if that was just me, or maybe I'm just assuming because I know John Green likes to hurt me. Maybe I just assumed that he was gonna kill her off, but I don't know. I wasn't super shocked by that, but then whenever it was like, oh, was it suicide? Like, did she intend to run into that cop car? I don't know, like the whole story is just really kind of like, it was really kind of weird, right? It's like she was angry at herself that she forgot that it was the anniversary of her mom's death. And the whole reason her mom probably died in the first place was because whenever she was a kid and her mom had, it was either a stroke or a heart attack, and she didn't call 911 because she like froze. So she was upset that she forgot the day, and I guess she wanted to go put flowers on her mom's grave, so that's why she left in the middle of the night drunk to go drive there. I mean, like, I don't know. It's still kind of weird. The whole thing of the book is like, did she mean to run straight into that cop car, or did she fall asleep? Like, that's what was really like open-ended about it. Or was it just a complete freak accident? Like, who knows? Like, I don't know what I believe. I personally don't think she did that. But there were so many like hints here and there of her, the getting out of the labyrinth, like hard and fast, navigating the labyrinth. I did like the whole labyrinth thing too. It's all, I love all those same concepts, the oblivion, the labyrinth of life, the great perhaps, like I'm here for all of it. But I don't know. I don't know what I feel about it. And it was kind of interesting, but also kind of frustrating that the last like half of the book was just about them looking for Alaska, trying to figure out like why she did this, or if she even did this, and what the deal was. And the way that it was just kind of left pretty open-ended, I get can be infuriating, but I'm also kind of like still thinking about it nearly a week later after reading it, which I just feel like is the sign and marker of a good book. I really liked this book. I didn't like, it wasn't like a 5-star best thing I ever read, but I thought the sort of like twist at the very end when we learn that like Miles is the one that wrote this book, essentially, like it kind of finishes with him saying that like he wrote down the story of Alaska and the way that she changed his life and his perspective and opened his eyes and all that. I love that. I love when you get to like the end of the book or the end of the movie and you realize that like it's all a flashback, or it's all a hallucination, or it's all a dream, or like it's all a whatever, like it all connects. I love that. I think the first third of this book was really kind of slow and hard for me to get into. I say it was hard for me to get into. I flew through it pretty fast, but the first third, you're really just kind of like getting introduced to the setting, all the characters, and that for me was like a little bit slow, and like figuring out the vibes and the way the school works and like the hierarchy of it all. But once I got past that, and once we got a little bit towards the middle, when him and Alaska were having like a little more interactions, I really just like couldn't put it down at that point, and I just like flew through the rest of the book really fast. But yeah, in conclusion, it was very good. Not as good or better than The Fault in Our Stars, not like one of my favorites, but just another testament to how wild of an author John Green is and how incredible of a human he is. And I just need to slowly work my way through everything he's written now. I don't know how I haven't at this point, but I just realized that all of my lights are on, and I don't normally do that when I film because the lighting is not lovely. So sorry about that. But yeah, guys, like I said, this was a very rambly video. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to hear your thoughts on this book. Like, what do you think Alaska's motives and intentions are. Like, did you like it? Did you not like it? Did you think it was a rough read? Did you like the way it talked about the ideas of suicide and death and the meaning of life and all of those sorts of things? Or was it just not your jam? I don't know. Just tell me anything. I'd love to hear it. Nikki's Book Nook merch available now. If you haven't seen my other announcements, link in description if you're interested. But yeah, I think that is it for me today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye.